All right, I call this meeting of the 13th Undergraduate Senate to order. I will begin by calling the roll. Senator Colchimero. Here. Senator Pintar.
Here.
Senator Hawk. Here. Senator Demisay.
Here.
Senator Dantzler. Senator Burgess. Senator Mecom is excused. Senator Chen. Senator Adams.
Here by proxy.
Senator Polinsky. Senator Najafi.
Here by proxy.
Senator Koshbin. Senator Fryer.
Here.
Senator Peno. Senator Martine. Senator Mara. Senator O'Connor. Senator DeGoes.
Here.
Senator Rakowski. Senator Al Jaber. Senator Roberts. Senator Legitimacy.
Here.
Senator Agdepa.
Here.
And Senator Robbins.
Here.
All right. 13 of 24 members present. We have quorum. And we move now to the adoption of the agenda. Is there any discussion on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, the agenda will be adopted without objection. And we come now to the adoption of the minutes of the 14th meeting. If there is no discussion, the minutes will be adopted without objection. And we move now to a period of public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak at this time? All right. Seeing none, we move to the reports from the officers. President Cayano and Director Mascaro are absent, so I will move to myself. I have a couple of things to say. First is that I have a few things on the floor to be considered today, but I am not here in my capacity as the sponsor of those pieces of legislation. So when we move into first reading on them, you can ask me questions as the chair, but I will not be doing the first part where I speak as the sponsor. Second is that I had another item originally introduced that you all had emailed to you that is not being introduced today because of the rules of debate and decorum, which prohibit two pieces of legislation that do the same thing from being considered in a single meeting. My bill that I had previously introduced, number 29, was just entirely the same thing as one part of Senator Go's new proposed election policy book. So by mutual agreement, my language has been inserted into the relevant part of his policy book. Third, we have an unusual item on the agenda today under new business, and that is a report of a committee. So that is something that the Senate can consider, but is not done very frequently. So I will read every one section of the bylaws that's relevant, just so everybody knows what's going on. The report of a committee is a written document that may be informational, persuasive, and/or analytical, expressing the considered and typically researched conclusion of the committee. Reports of committees require one reading before the whole body of the Senate and is introduced into the originating committee according to the policies of the chair. A report of a committee cannot be amended from the floor of the Senate, and so changes must be made by referring it back to its committee with a majority vote. A report cannot be referred to a committee that did not draft the original, and the report is not considered a binding decision of the Senate, but it is suggestions that can be taken up by other means. It is not subject to executive veto. So those are my things. Does anyone have any questions for me? All right. Senator Rakowski's proxy today,
I am.
and you have a report?
I do.
All right. Could you share it with me?
Oh, actually, I did not, because I shared it with Trevor, so I share it with you right now.
Would anyone like to motion to give Mr. Cicero a spot on the agenda? Senator Robbins?
A motion that we amend the agenda to allow Mr. Cicero to have time for his report.
All right. Would you like that to go after Director Mascaro?
Sure.
All right. Is that how I spell your name right? All right. All right. All right. The agenda is amended. Okay. Yeah, so now that
longer have that podium. There it is. I just prefer speaking from a podium. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, would a senator mind making a motion to allow me to speak for 15 minutes? Thank you.
Senator O'Connor,
Allow the.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will move to voting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. All right, motion carries.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Just wanted to remind everyone, Nikki's 2 singles are out. You can stream them on all services, iTunes, Spotify, Tidal if that's your jam. Download, purchase. We gotta get a #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Okay.
Chumlin is already in the top 10.
Chun-Li and Barbie Ting are back-to-back 1 and 2 on iTunes, both streaming and purchase downloads.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, now, onto something a little more serious. I wanted to provide a quick update on the student rights cards. The last time I spoke, I told everyone that they would be implemented by March 31st, and I'm happy to announce that President Payano and I followed up on that commitment, and they were installed by March 31st. Phase 1 is completed. They are in the posting areas in MGC, and they are in the MGC elevators. And phase 2 is underway as we speak. Meetings on phase 2 have already begun. Notes and contact information for those who will be involved on the administrative side of phase 2 are being put together in transition documents. So both my eventual successor and President Payano's successor, President-elect Fernandez, will have access to all that information so that when they're here over the summer doing what we've been doing for the past year, they'll know exactly how to make sure that phase 2 happens. I think the cards have been very well received across campus. We got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of Snapchats seeing the cards in the elevators. All in all, I think people are pretty pleased. You might have noticed that even the Eagle reported on it. To be honest with you, I don't know what they're going to be able to write about when I graduate because they seem to talk about me so much, but I wish them them and their readership the best next year. But all in all, it's been a great first week of seeing them up, and we're going to be doing some tabling events once the weather gets a little bit better, so that we can tell people even more information about the cards and how to find them. You can go to the next slide. On Wednesday, as we refuse to slow down in the constant stream of projects, reports, and updates we're releasing, we released the Bias-Related Incident Report, Edition 2. This report is a joint report between myself, President Payano, and the new Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and it's Equity and Inclusion now, correct? Yeah, Rafael Sestero. And the report is Edition 2 because it follows the recommendations made in Edition 1. In Edition 1, we asked the university to include bias as an aggravating factor that would result in a student who is convicted of a crime being treated more seriously, having their sanction be more serious if they were found that bias and identity motivation was a factor in their crime. Now we are asking that we go a step further and actually amend the section that lists all prohibited behavior to include bias-related incidents as a standalone violation. And so that's what Edition 2 calls for. It reached a lot of students via the email that was sent out in conjunction between my office and Secretary Schneider's office. The report researches 10 of our peer institutions and does a cross-analysis between our policies and theirs. If you've read the report done by Chairman Hawk, you can see a lot of similarities in both looking at university policies that are similar to ours and then our policies and using that analysis to see what we're doing well and where we have some shortcomings. As I said, the report has one sole recommendation, and if the Senate will allow me, I wanted to briefly read a section of the report that provides the rationale for why we're calling for this justification. I don't want to assume, but I imagine that the majority of senators in this room probably support the findings of the report, but I know that not everyone on campus does because there are some concerns about limiting free speech or limiting the First Amendment in what we're calling for the report. I've discussed this at length before, but apparently it hasn't been enough, so I'm going to do it again now. I'm a staunch supporter of the First Amendment. I wouldn't do anything to harm students' access to the First Amendment. I don't think that this report does so. So I just wanted to read briefly from the report justification so that if any of you have questions, or if any of your friends or your peers or colleagues in different student organizations have questions, you can explain to them why we're calling for this new language in the Conduct Code. So it begins right here, yes. Okay. So our first rationale is about ensuring accountability. And the report reads, the preamble of the Student Conduct Code, and I can send this to you in full, by the way, if it'll be helpful for the minutes. The preamble of the Student Conduct Code explains the code is designed to support a safe, honest, and inclusive community with a shared commitment to acting with mutual respect and forming the highest standards of ethics and morals among its members. Creating this sort of community where honesty is valued and ethical behavior is promoted requires that students are held accountable for their actions. Accountability is critical when fostering a community that values honesty because it ensures that students fully comprehend the consequences of their actions. Without the addition of a standalone violation, it is virtually impossible to hold perpetrators of bias-related incidents accountable for their actions. This is because of a glaring disconnect between the Student Conduct Code and the university's policy on disclosing student disciplinary records. When a student applies to a graduate school, to a job, if they are transferring schools, or if they are applying to any sort of comparable institution, the Conduct Code will disclose at the request of the institution the applicant's disciplinary record. This information disclosed includes the date of the case resolution, the violations for which the student was found responsible, and the sanctions imposed and the status of when those sanctions were completed. Any additional information, notably significant factors, like the significant factor that was included after edition 1 of the Conduct Code report was passed, are left out of the disclosure. With no standalone violation for committing a bias-related incident, students who did in fact violate the code, out of bias motivation escape from being held fully accountable for their actions. A student who spray paints a racial slur on a building, for example, is found responsible for vandalism, and that is the violation disclosed. This instance clearly illustrates the problem, as the limited information included in disclosures of disciplinary records results in a failure to fully understand the context surrounding a violation. An inconsistency across processes created a situation in which perpetrators of hate can avoid the full extent of the consequences of their actions. This is a consequence of not plainly, specifically, and explicitly identifying why a student has violated the code when they committed an identity-based attack. This is, of course, an unintended consequence and is not a reflection of university leadership's views on combating bias-related incidents. The university already may, in some instances, disclose more information to ensure that future institutions know the full extent of an applicant's transgressions. That practice, however, should be the rule and not the exception. Leaving AU should not represent a get-out-of-jail-free card for students who promote hate and spread fear amongst the student body at American University. All community members must understand that they will be held accountable for their actions, and that means altering the system to ensure that every student is honest about the extent of their disciplinary record once they leave our institution. So, I hope that makes it more clear that we are not trying to limit what people can say or what they can do insofar as accessing their constitutional rights, but we're trying to make sure that everyone is held accountable for the full extent of their actions when they do commit a bias-related incident. Okay, we can move on. So financial aid advocacy. I wanted to provide an update on the legislation that was passed by Speaker Pro Tempore Bobby Zitzman. So we've had a lot of successful conversations with AU Central. Progress has been made there. Training materials are going to be created with our office and their office so that the Office of the Financial Advocate, the new office that was created under Senator Liston's legislation, will have training materials for future reference for advocates that will be handling financial aid cases. The chief advocate is Isma Khan. She is enormously qualified and very talented. She is an individual who benefits significantly from financial aid. So this is a personal issue to her, and she treats it that way clearly. And she's been handling financial aid cases already, and she's been handling them to great success. Next slide. On campus safety, President Payano and I, after the most recent incident where a student was arrested on campus, sent out a student-wide email listing a number of initiatives that we were going to take to make sure that students felt both safe on campus, but also that they were being treated fairly by campus police and that everyone was being treated in a manner that was dignified and respectful. So again, I'm happy to report that we have followed up on that commitment. We have altered Case Connect to add a new tab under student rights on public safety. It lists not only how you can file a complaint, so if you believe you've been treated poorly by a police officer, there's an existing form by which you can file a complaint and list the officer and the incident. It also provides you additional information on other services that are provided to you by AUPD and how to get in contact with AUPD. And this little bar right here is relatively significant. On every other tab of Case Connect, this bar says contact an advocate. On this page, we changed that so that there's no confusion. We are not trying to make any student think that if they want to file a police report or if they need a police officer, that a case advocate without an undergraduate degree all of a sudden can serve as a police officer. So we changed that tab to make sure that if they do need more information, they're going direct to the source. Okay, next slide. Transition. So then just briefly, I wanted to explain that transition documents for the Center for Advocacy and Student Equity have been drafted and finalized that are going to be presented to both President Piano and Dr. Fontaala, just in case they have any additions on what they think is important for transition documents. Those also are going to be provided to President-elect Piano. It includes information, as I said before, on the student rights cards. Meetings have been held between myself and President Piano, and meetings are scheduled between myself and our phenomenal President-elect Fernandez, so that we can do everything possible to get all of us on the same page. I'm very excited about that meeting. And just on a side note, more personal, but President-elect Fernandez had a very comprehensive, very detailed, very good platform. So I'm excited to be able to work with someone who has all these great ideas already. I think we're going to be a really good team for the short amount of time I have to work with her. And then lastly, this is my big plea, my big like whiny begging, getting down on my knees. I'll do whatever it takes at this point. Case needs a new office, and I know that space on campus is limited. I know how difficult it was to get home, but we really, really need a new office. And so over the course of the next few weeks, hopefully I'll have the chance to work with senators, the outgoing executives, and the incoming executives to explain, and even the budget advisory committee as we enter those conversations as well, to explain to them why it's appropriate that Case has a new office. We have had the same office for roughly 15 to 20 years. When the office was assigned to us, it was completely appropriate and made sense for a number of reasons. First, when Case was first formed under its previous name, the Student Advocacy Center, we had around 5 to 6 advocates, full staff members, including the director. It really didn't get any bigger than that. We now have a staff of 40 people. And when you think about like room occupancy and fire hazards, it's not even a fire hazard. If you try to slam 40 people in that office, the amount of oxygen that you would have in there would dissipate within 30 seconds. It is physically impossible for us to have meetings in there. It's not even possible to have meetings when we have a client who wants multiple advocates working on their case. We literally have a couch and 2 chairs. So it's just not feasible. It really doesn't make sense. The much bigger concern, maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you want Will and his 40 staff members to be slammed in that closet. Okay, I get it. The big concern though is confidentiality. The office is literally made of plywall. It is barely considered an architectural material that would be used in a building, which means that anything that is said, especially by someone like me with a louder voice, can be heard by anyone, can be heard by the people that occupy the office immediately adjacent to mine, which is the executive office, which makes sense considering that Case was not originally an office. It was part of the executive office, which they drywalled over 20 years ago to form the Case office. So really, for all intents and purposes, we are a glorified closet. But even more serious is that, especially when those frosted doors are open, because the walls are so thin and because they back up to that little space where there's couches and seats, anything that we're saying to a client can be heard to other people. And so by federal law, university policy, and our own office non-disclosure agreement, we promise with 3 levels of guarantees to our clients that everything they say to us is confidential. On our end, we keep everything confidential, but it's impossible for Will's voice not to be carried outside of the office simply by how small and by how poorly designed our office is. So as we enter the summer and the budget process, it is normally a great time to look into new office space. And I'm pleading you, if you can help me, please, please, please help me find a new office, because at this point, we're losing credibility and our reputation is being hurt because we can't guarantee confidentiality. I said my piece. Lastly, any questions?
Senator O'Connor?
So with regards to the new financial aid,
Yeah.
process, you will help with that.
Yeah.
At what point in the process, like someone that's having, say, an issue with financial aid?
Yeah.
At what point, like the process, would they actually come to you, like, is it they have an issue with someone in the office,
Mhm.
if they're struggling with that?
That's a
I would
great,
imagine that working.
that's a great question. The only part of the process we handle are appeals. There are two different ways that students can appeal their financial aid award being decreased, and we handle those. And so we're versed in both SAP appeals and I believe it's changing status appeals. But that's the only area that we get involved in, specifically because AU Central wasn't comfortable with us dealing anything with like HR office issues or anything that dealt with student financial records. Technically, given that we sign release forms that allow us to look at further protected information, I don't think that's an issue. But regardless of all that, if I thought that we'd be helpful there or helpful with staff complaints, I would push for us to be involved there. In our experience, we're significantly more effective dealing just with the appeals.
Senator Martinez-Brockton?
Regarding the conduct code, you
Yes.
actually talked about holding students accountable. How specifically is case and enforcement?
Hold the accountability. So, if I wasn't clear, I can explain again. It's not about CASE holding students accountable, nor is it about students holding other students accountable. It's about the university having an obligation to help hold students accountable. And so by including a specific violation in the conduct code that will then result in the student being found responsible, not just for spray painting or vandalism or verbal violence or physical violence, but in addition to that, also being found responsible for committing a bias-related incident, that then goes on their record, which follows them for the next 7 years, which almost can follow them even beyond 7 years, depending upon who's requesting the information. And so if student X spray paints a racial slur on a building and they get found responsible of a bias-related incident, which they will be under the conduct code that we want to see rewritten, then when they apply to UVA, because they no longer want to go to a school where everyone knows that they're a racist, it'll say you've been found responsible of a bias-related incident. Currently, it doesn't. That's why this change is important.
Other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. President Payano?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm not ill. I send you something on,
Oh, all right.
and it's like graphics. I didn't make it. A PowerPoint is gonna come in your last day. No, next week. Okay, so I want to start with what's coming up. So the big coming up is Senior Week, which is going to start Monday, April 23rd, and it would end on April 27th. Yes, all of these up until the 26th are only for seniors. Friday, April 27th, we're gonna have first year flashbacks for seniors, but everybody's welcome. It's going to be held on the quad. We're gonna have Pi USG on the face. So, I mean, I'm looking for volunteers. So if any of you guys want to participate in it, more than glad to add you to the list. To be very clear, that Pi USG on the face, well, it's a great thing, and it sounds funny, it actually has a very deep meaning. So what we're looking for is to obtain donations by students to the university. It doesn't have to be to the university. It is for causes that they care about. So for example, I'm a senior, I'm a junior, I'm a sophomore, I'm a freshman, and I am part of LASSO or LULAC or MSA or any of the, or AUSG, and you want to pie somebody in the face, you can, and then your donation can go to a specific cause that you care about, whether that is a multicultural org, whether that is an office here on AU's campus, whether that is a scholarship, because I don't know if you guys are aware, but we have the Latinx Book Award and the Black Book Award, which allows students, 2 to 3 students to not worry about their book expenses because they're being covered by the scholarship. So please, please, please make sure you, this is gonna go live this week, so please make sure you share, please make sure that your student, that your friends are going to Friday, April the 23rd on the quad from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And for those seniors in the room, I'm looking at you guys. And for those of you guys who have seniors in as a friend, please let them know that these are happening. Senior breakfast is going to be in Hotel Atrium. It's like, come pick up your breakfast. It's not a time commitment at all. You come, you pick up your breakfast, and then we're going to give you like a list of things that are going to be happening that week. Then the East Campus Senior Barbecue, you can only go to one of the barbecues. So it's either you can go on Tuesday or you can go on Thursday because we didn't have capacity to have an entire barbecue that can hold all the graduating seniors. So we decided to divvy it up into two. This is in conjunction with alumni relations. So this is an entire, so as we're talking about making AU not only inclusive, but creating what is an AU student beyond identity, right? As we talk about our core values as AU students, this week is supposed to start that sense of tradition, that sense of like what makes an AU student a student, how AUSG can be a key part of that conversation, bridging the gap between students and alumni, because alumni want to help us figure out what is next, what is needed for a job, what skills do you need, what classes should you take. So AUSG is gonna help. So this is one of the things that we're going to do is set tradition. So yeah, please make sure that you let your senior friends know that this is happening. If you want to partake on the fair on Friday, please let me know. I always love volunteers. And yes, please, 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 I encourage everybody here to think about a cause that you're passionate about in AU and to make your donation, even if it's $5. I think that if you start being engaged with your alma mater at a very young age before you graduate, more likely you're going to be involved in the future. So just to know that our service should not end in Senate or in the exec team, but that it should go beyond and we should come back as alum so that students like us don't need to face the same problems and the same hurdles that we once did. Okay, can we share the other thing? Grace is wonderful. Yeah. If nobody knows Grace in this room, I mean, she's great. So this is another graphic, American University Senior Week, April 23rd to the 27th, and then the next one, please. And for those that are hesitant about donating, well, I have some incentives for you. First of all, for those seniors that donate, you get a medal to wear in graduation, which is super cool. Who doesn't love to wear a medal saying that you donated? 2, you're gonna get recognition, a toast to your graduates. So for those that aren't seniors yet, it's like this fancy thing that we're gonna have in Katzen. And for the first time, we actually get alcohol. Hi. And they toast to you. You can bring your parents. It's a really nice occasion. Then we're gonna get free food at the next senior social, so a bread soda. So if your senior friends decided to donate, they get free food at the senior soda. And if you enter, if any of you guys decide to enter, this is not exclusive to seniors. So if any of you guys decide to enter and you donate $20.18, because 2018, do you see clever? No. Okay. You can get a lunch with President Burwell or a personal photo shoot with Claude. I mean, great, photo shoot with Claude. We all love Claude. Come on, the first one. President Burwell, no? I mean, I'm just saying 45 minutes, she pays for your lunch. You get to talk to her about anything you want. And it's a raffle, so great. So that's my first thing. That's what's coming up. In terms of what has happened, I don't know if a lot of you guys know, but one of my big things is inclusion in this campus. And the Inclusive Excellence Plan has been a huge part of what we discuss and what we're doing right now, not only as a body, as AUSG, but also as a university-wide initiative. So I've been thinking a lot because I also sit on the President Council on Diversity and Inclusion, which was a hat that I wore prior to being president. And something that we discuss a lot is how can we make sure that students are at the center of those conversations. So I'm happy to announce that as a student that sits in President Council on Diversity and Inclusion, and as now SG president, we were able to establish a student advisory board of students that are going to be the advisory board for the President Council on Diversity and Inclusion. And of course, you guys they would talk to Fanta. They would have access, and they would have the ability to, as things are rolling out in the university, to put their concerns, to put their ideas out there, to let the administration know what is going on and how are students taking it. So that would be a key part, and that's a huge part of how we keep students at the center of the conversation. Additionally, this would be an open application process. So it's not like, oh, hey, you're the president of X club, you get to be automatically in it. It's no, everybody can apply. The application would be under President-elect Fernandez, not under me, because we're going to start the application in the fall. So please be in the lookout. We have a very, not intensive yet, very, I would say rigorous. There's going to be 3 permanent positions. So out of the 12, there's going to be 9 that are going to be application-based, and then there's going to be 3 that, due to the nature of the work that they do at AAU, are automatically in it. So the DEI director, the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion is automatically in it. The chair of this body, that is the chair of the diversity and inclusion committee, is automatically in it. And then we're asking the other bodies, so the graduate council and the law and the student bar association, to see if they have prospective people in their cabinets that look at diversity and inclusion, and they would also sit in that body. So that's a good news. I hope you guys are excited. It doesn't seem like you guys are, but I mean, that was an action that I took because a lot of the people were like, oh, what's happening with the inclusion, like the inclusive excellence plan? Why aren't we seeing anything? And people want action and action and action. And I'm like, this is a great way to not only get fresh faces in the room, but to also to make sure that students, not only 3 or 4, but that 12 students are aware of what's happening and can go to their prospective class and to their prospective majors and say to their peers what's going on in terms of inclusion on this campus. So I think it's a big win. I hope you guys do too. So that's my second point. How much minutes do I have?
I'll say you're out now.
Oh, can somebody extend my time?
I motion to extend by indefinite.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those say no. All right, there you go.
Well, Will Mascaro did a great job at explaining to you guys what's going on with student right cards. So please, huge applause for him and all the work that he has been doing. It's been amazing. He honestly has been an amazing part of my team. And I think that, yeah, I do think that once you graduate, it would be like a hole and people would need to find somebody else. So thank you for all the work.
Same with the Omni. I think this is huge. A round of applause for getting students to success.
And then my 4th point is going to be on transition. So we have a very extensive transition plan. We have decided that our transition director is going to be Rafael Cesteros. And I'm going to explain that reasoning for everybody in the room. Cesteros. I add S's in everybody's names, so I apologize. Cesteros. So the reasoning behind that is because, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm a very demanding boss, right? So I need somebody who's going to be up at 3 a.m. in the morning typing the transition papers, because so I'm a huge believer that we need to change the structure, not change the person that is in office, because the person in office is going to leave. You need to create a structure that is going to withstand whoever comes next. So what we're trying to do in this transition plan is set a set of documents that would guide incoming presidents beyond me, beyond President Fernandez, and so on and so forth, so that then they have the knowledge and the foundation that they need in order to be effective to the student body. Right now we have a document of about 7 or 8 pages without including, so it's going to be a binder. So we're going to have the letter of the outgoing president needs to have within your first 60 days. And then we're going to have, so it's a very complex transition. And I think that the only person, me and not tap out the next 2 weeks that they're here. And I think that Rafael knows how I work. And he's starting to get President Fernandez's way of working. And I feel comfortable making that choice. I hope that none of you guys have any problem with that suggestion. But if you do, me and President Fernandez are more than glad to make that, hear your concerns. And unfortunately, and we're working on transition. So if you guys have any question on transition, please feel free to ask me. And yeah, no, brunch. Oh, our transition brunch is going to be April 29th. That is going to be, Solomon is doing the work for that. So be ready for April 29th. It's going to be fun. So yeah, I think that that's all I have for now. Next week, I'll have a more in-depth PowerPoint and slide on everything that has been done and things that are going to continue over the summer. In terms of the referendum, I had meetings with both student AUCC and student media board and their chairs, not the entire body. Let me make that one point clear. And then I'm getting in touch with them again to make sure that they have spoken to their respective bodies and then get back to me in terms of how we're going to move forward in November. But that's not a conversation that they're going to have with me. That's a conversation that they're going to have with President-elect Fernandez and her team, of course. So with that being said, I'm done. Anybody have any questions?
Questions for the president? Senator Martinez, Proviso.
Yeah, question regarding the transition documents. So once they're complete, will they be available to the public?
Transition documents, official. So you guys can probably get, so the bylaws and things like that are already made public for everybody in this body. So that's not, if we're talking about calendars and the top 60 people that the president should meet, more than glad, but it's not going to include minutes. And it's not going to include in-depth personal conversations that I'm going to have with Fernandez, just because transparency is key and it's important. And I'm more than glad to share the overview structure of it, because that's what we're trying to change. We're trying to change how transition, and I've personally, me and Will have talked about transition multiple occasions, which is why he does his transition papers and I'm doing my transition papers. So I'm more than glad to set the structure out with you guys and whatever, but I don't feel 100% comfortable sharing the entire deep meetings that I'm going to be having with President Fernandez, not because I'm not willing to be transparent, but there are some information that I think pertains to both of us.
I think it's also like, it'll be slightly different for each
President?
Like,
Yeah.
I have certain relationships that like other presidents won't have, like, you'll essentially be getting a look into my calendar, like that is not useful for anyone, really. Sorry, I was gonna comment on this senior class stuff. So like the last couple of times I presented in Senate, all of you have asked like, what can we do to like help AU like develop, so that like, 40 years from now, like we are where we want to be as far as our endowment, as far as things like that. These little things are like small steps that actually make us in that like head us in that direction. So if financial security, making sure that tuition isn't increasing as much every single year, something you're interested in really long term. You won't really reap the benefits of it, but like 80 years from now, once we get to that stage, however long it takes, it will be because of stuff like this. And then I had a question for you actually, and I know we're gonna talk about everything regarding the Inclusive Excellence Plan in depth one-on-one, and I'm super happy that you did that because as you know, it's something I like campaigned on. But just I think it's important for Senate to know as well, kind of what is the timeline going to be looking like as far as receiving applications and things like that?
So currently, President Dr. Ah and her team are creating the application. So what we were going to do is we were going to roll it out by the end of this semester. However, we understand that one, students are swamped. Two, people do not know how their schedule are going to look in the fall. So the timeline is going to be is that within the first 2 weeks of classes in the fall semester, the application is going to be rolled out. We're going to let it out for a month. And this is the tentative timeline. I'll come back with a firm timeline next week in my beautiful PowerPoint. And then we're gonna have a month of applications, and then Dr. Ah and the President Council on Diversity and Inclusion are gonna review it alongside with few key stakeholders that your job description already make them suitable for the discussion, and that's how they're gonna be chosen.
Further questions?
Oh, wait, and let me do say what's in the application. One is it's your resume, of course, a letter of recommendation, at least one. Two, there's a question asking you why you want to be in this body. Three is going to ask you what is the most important aspect of the inclusion excellence plan. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that students that are sitting on this body are aware what are the points in the inclusive excellence plan and what it takes, right? And the fifth thing that they would have to do is explain or suggest how they would go about implementing the point that they think is the most important one in the inclusive excellence. So it's a very heavy application, and it asks you for your time commitments, because we want to make sure that the people that are in it are actually going to dedicate time to it, because I know how we all love to overcommit, myself included.
Further questions for the president?
No.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi all. Wanted to give you a few updates. The diversity survey for the internal diversity survey for AUSG went out last Monday. That was 2 weeks behind the initial proposed timeline due to some kind of reviews and conversations with student activities that they wanted to have about, where data was going to be stored and stuff like that. So that has gone out. Currently I have 56 responses, 22 from Senate, which is the largest majority. So thank you all for your responses. We think there is over 100 people in AUSG, so we're probably, I would bet, around we're about 1/3, I would say, maybe a little bit more than 1/3 of the AUSG body that has filled it out. We'll make another push at the beginning of this week for people to fill that out. The form or the survey will close on Friday, and then if I miraculously have time on my hands to produce a report and data, I can present to you on the following Sunday of when it closes, but most likely I will present to you, and my report on the survey will be published a week from the Friday that the survey closes. Just so everybody knows, that will be first published internally, and then the information will be published externally as well, so that the student body knows what our diversity is like here. So I thank Senate for their participation in that. Besides that, we had a housing symposium, went off very well. A lot of conversations about it, and hoping to bring some more of that kind of, those kind of events and those kind of topics to campus next semester. What else? Transition. I'm obviously transition director. There is some amazing work going on with transition between President Payano and President-elect Fernandez. Really some quality understanding and conversations around how we can make SG the most effective organization and body that it can be. And I just want to hit on terms of the transparency point. I think one of the biggest benefits of having a strong transition is to be able to have those personal conversations between the people that are transitioning, to know what didn't work, what did work, kind of the things that they did, some of the places that they faltered, some of the places that they succeeded. And some of those conversations do get personal. So I think that's it's a really good thing that happens. And I'm very excited for the upcoming administration, the further transition we have, for the transition brunch that Vice President Self is working on. And I think on my end, that is it.
Questions for the director?
Yeah, go ahead.
Senator Fryer.
So just real quick, is there like a reason, or whatever, to release the results of the survey internally within AFC first, as opposed to releasing it publicly altogether?
No, and I'm happy to release it all at the same time. I just wanted you guys to see it, because you guys are the ones that it's you guys. It's a reflection of what this body is, and what a USG is. But I'm happy to have conversations about it. There will be no changes to anything when I release it internally first. I just was going to give the courtesy to the people within the organization to release it first. I'm happy to have a conversation about releasing at the same time.
Senator Kowski's proxy.
Yeah, this is something I'm sure you'll account for, so I'm not particularly worried, but questions about gender or sexuality, you might want to be careful in the way that you disseminate them to make sure that nothing is personally identifiable.
Yeah, so it's all anonymous.
Yeah, I understand, but for example, say like one department has like 2 or 3 people, if you break something down by department and like that.
I see,
right?
departments might be targeted.
Yeah,
Got it.
that's what I'm saying.
Understood, yeah. So I do ask what branch of AUSG you're in. That is mostly for our understanding,
Yeah,
right?
no, that's
Because-
good, I'm glad you did.
Yeah, because one of the things that is most important to me with this survey is to then sit down when I'm compiling my report, and, you know, with the committee that oversaw the survey creation and kind of talk about, okay, so we see that, you know, let's say, I'm just gonna hit on KPU for a second. I don't know if this is true, I haven't looked at and analyzed the results. But KPU doesn't have the diversity that other departments are showing that they have. So let's have a conversation about how maybe we can get that to become more diverse, how we can kind of build the diversity within that department. And then I think the next step that is really important after we look at all these raw data and see how diverse AU is then to have the conversation about how we're inclusive of this diversity, right? So it's one thing to be diverse, it's another thing to be inclusive. So how do we have a conversation about how we have these numbers now, we know whether or not AUSG is diverse, and then we have a conversation about how we're inclusive to everyone that AUSG is and that AUSG represents.
Further questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you. And I already gave my report, so we move now to reports from committees and to the Special Committee on Finance. Senator Hawk.
How much time do we have?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't have a fancy PowerPoint or graphics, but I just have a couple of things I wanted to report on. The first thing is the financial aid report. So I think Presiding Officer Zitzman sent that out via email to everyone earlier today. That was mandated obviously by Bill 171810, which was about the college affordability. Just to give some of the main points that it makes, we analyzed several, I think 9 financial aid policies that AU could implement to make itself more affordable for the undergraduate student body. And we came to the conclusion that there are basically 3 tiers among these policies. You have the policies that are pragmatic, that can be done, that are easy, and that would really benefit the student body. You have the tier that's sort of like the intermediate policies that the Senate should definitely advocate for, but maybe not prioritize just because they're more difficult and not as realistic. And then you have the highest tier, which is just policies that we don't think that the Senate should advocate for because they just are not fitting for American University. So among the first tier of things that should definitely be advocated for, things like trying to get AU to publish a sort of shopping sheet, just detailing the costs for the entire 4 years or however long a student decides to stay at AU for their education. Also things like trying to make sure that our tuition increases are limited, and that's something that AU has actually been doing for the past several years. Its tuition increases have not been that high. So those are achievable, and those would really benefit the students in terms of financial planning and ensuring that costs are kept low. As far as the intermediate things, we think that there should be advocacy for looking at reducing housing and dining costs. Obviously, one of the big things students always talk about is that like freshmen are required to have, I think, the 175 block plan. A lot of freshmen don't even eat on campus, so maybe that's not necessary. It would definitely help reduce costs because I think it's like a quarter of the cost of attendance for undergraduate students that are full-time comes from housing and dining. And then as far as things that the committee doesn't think we should advocate for, things like a tuition freeze or fix, simply because where they have been implemented, most of the time they failed, and also because AU is just, our financial model is not set up to be sustainable with those sorts of policies. Also things like trying to increase the amount of money we spend from our endowment towards financial aid might not, or are not things that would be sustainable for American University. Finally, I think the most important point is that the undergraduate senate needs to inform students of financial aid opportunities, scholarships, deadlines for filing things. Is through my meetings, my personal meetings with the financial aid office, they say that one of the big major reasons that students cannot afford AU is simply because they do not maximize the potential amount of financial aid they can get. So they miss filing deadlines, like, you know, they forget to file with FAFSA, for example, or they forget to apply for need-based aid. And that's actually really critical now because in the past several years, AU has shifted its financial aid model to make it less merit-based aid and more need-based aid. So that's just something that I think is the most important thing for the Senate to do, because we can advocate for things all we want, but if students don't understand what they can do to make their college experience more affordable, it won't matter. So that's, and then the next steps for the report, I want to disseminate it to the student body. I'm going to work with Chris on that because I do think it's something that students should have access to so that they know what we're doing in the finance committee and how we think that we can make their college educations more affordable. And then the second thing I want to talk about is the budget process. Everything's been going pretty well so far. We finished the info sessions on Thursday. And so per the bylaws, I'm giving all the departments a week to give me their budget proposals, which means the budget hearings are going to start this Thursday on April 19th. They're going to go until Tuesday, April 24th. I sent an email out to everyone in AUSG with specific times, et cetera. And then some other important dates are Wednesday, April 25th. The committee's hopefully going to meet to draft the budget after the hearings are over. That following Thursday, we're going to hold a town hall so that students can give input before it's finally presented to the Senate on Sunday, April 29th. And for the town hall, the location is to be determined. I'm working with Chris on that. And yeah, that's all I have for you.
All right. Questions for the chairman? Senator Martinez Proxy.
Is there anything regarding financial aid for doctors?
So that was not something that we looked at specifically in the report, but I do understand it's very important. However, also keep in mind that it's my understanding that those that class of students can apply for largely the same financial aid opportunities that are available to most other students. So I think that a lot of what's in the report applies to that class of people.
Further questions? Senator Demisay.
Yeah, so I haven't fully read your report yet. I'll finish reading later today. But some of the questions, like some awareness that students are concerned about on campus is that, like, there have been a lot of situations where they do get their financial aid package, but like depleted throughout like their college, like every year become less and less. Another issue is like getting their aid taken away like in the middle of the semester. So have you guys do you guys talk about that in your report or no?
So no, just because we were focused more on like overall affordability. However, that what you're talking about, the first thing you noted about aid decreasing over the years, that's when the EFC, the expected family contributions, usually that's the reason, like the EFCs go up, so the financial aid goes down. My understanding is that CASE is working on making sure that students can retain their aid, have the highest possibility of retaining the same aid they had the first time around. And to the second point about aid getting taken away in the middle, I think that's sometimes for academic reasons, and CASE is also working on it.
Further questions? Senator O'Connor.
What do you think is the best way to advocate and publicize the whole scholarships that people don't know about or at least know?
So I think the first step would be to meet with the financial aid office because that's where I didn't know a lot of this stuff before I had all those meetings with them. They actually have a master Excel spreadsheet with all of these scholarships. That is something that I think should be publicized. I couldn't find it online. I don't know if it's open source information. Publicizing that would be good. Also, obviously I'm gonna get this report publicized to the student body so that they know about all of these things. And then just making sure that when the deadlines do come up, like the FAFSA deadline, I believe is March 1st. When that comes up, a little in advance, we should put out information telling students that they need to file. The financial aid office does that as well, but I think just doubling down on that would be really important for ensuring that students can really utilize the options they have.
Senator Martinez Proxy.
I have a recommendation that would actually work towards or with student organizations that talk about we like to help get the scholarship information out because I think the organizations are actually critical in pulling out this type of information. So would you agree with that, Stephen?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Also, it's because a lot of the scholarships, if you ever get a chance to see that Excel spreadsheet, they have specific criteria, and so a lot of people in different organizations, for example, with different skill sets would be qualified for a lot of these things, and they may not even know it. So it is critical to go to these organizations and people who specialize in certain things and to tell them about it. Absolutely.
Senator O'Connor.
Can I have a question for you?
Sure.
So do you think it would be possible to have somebody in that financial aid department down to someone and be like, hey, like, you know, you are someone X, Y, Z, you have these skills and issues, and to have that person specialize in that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really good idea, and our staff is large enough to accommodate that.
Further questions? Senator DeGose?
So I'm looking through the report, which I'm super impressed by the way, well done. And I'm looking at the administrative costs section, and it's crazy to me that this listing that they give of costs administratively is from 2012, and they haven't released anything since then. Do you think that we could maybe push specifically for them to do a full like cost assessment of AU in that same sort of breakdown that we have more recent data from 2012?
Yeah, so that's actually a concern that came up when I was doing research for the report. Like that section has data from 2012. If you go to the section about loans, that data is from 2014. Now at the bottom of AU's, at the bottom where I got that data, it says that AU releases information for the previous academic year publicly. I couldn't find that information. So all I could find was from 2014. So I do think that those are conversations, again, that the Senate can go to the financial aid office and ask them about, because they say they're going to inform us about every year, and then that obviously isn't happening, or at least I couldn't find anything about that. So I do agree that that's an important concern.
Further questions? So, President Fernandez.
Just want to add on to your question about pace that you asked, Will. I'd say first, surround, I think it's amazing. I think just like moving forward, I think it's important that like if we do actually, if someone in case like dedicated to doing this, plus like we have a bunch of undergraduates kind of doing this, plus like keep it in mind that this is also like something like very crucial I will be working on, just like making sure that we all know who's working on that, because we don't want to be operating in silos and it's like everyone's doing their own thing instead of just like working together to like invest in our energies. So just like keep that in mind as we transition moving forward, I would say.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes our reports from committees. Yes, go ahead. All right. We move now to new business. Consideration of the first bill. The clerk will report the legislation by number and title.
Bill 17-18-28, a bill to prevent the ossification of leadership board.
Now, as I said during my report, I am the sponsor of this legislation, but I'm not here today in that capacity since I am presiding in the Senate. So I will not speak on this bill in the normal fashion, but you can still direct questions to the chair. So with that, at this time, are there any questions about this bill? All right. Seeing none, this bill will be referred to the Committee on Rules and Privileges without objection. All right, moving to the next piece of legislation, the clerk will report the legislation by number and title.
Bill 17-18-29, the resolving occasional general election.
No, that's not on the agenda anymore. We're on number 30.
Bill 17-18-30, a bill to amend the ethical and judicial standards.
All right, same thing. Are there any questions?
Is this just first reading?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, seeing no questions, this bill will be referred to CRP without objection. All right, next, the clerk will report the legislation by number and title.
Bill 17-18-31, a bill to define the jurisdiction of the student government.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, this bill will be referred to CRP without objection. All right, next, the clerk shall report the legislation by number and title.
Bill 17-18-32, a bill for the reforming of elections bylaws.
Senator DeGose, would you like to speak as sponsor of the legislation?
I would.
All right.
So last week, when I was confirmed, I said I was going to jump headfirst into the deep end, and I have done just that and rewritten the entirety of the AUSG bylaw section on elections. A lot of that was just movement and migration of things, because the intent of this bill is to simplify the bureaucracy of how elections work by putting JSAT board if this is past what used to be JSEP, underneath the Elections Commission. Amy and I have both talked about this at length. It doesn't make sense that the Elections Commissioner selectively interprets some elections policy to enforce their job, but not others. It's not clear where that divide is separate, and it just makes things take longer when you have to jump back and forth between these two bodies who, for all intents and purposes, could be the same thing. So throughout this bill, essentially all of the previous requirements of JSAP, everything that they're responsible for, get shoved into a new group under the Elections Commission, which the name is not updated in this bill. It's most recently called the Elections Commission Policy Board. The Elections Commissioner serves as the chair of this board, and it's still made up of 4 other members, as JSAP was 2 appointed by the speaker and 2 appointed by the president of AUSG. It's fairly simple other than that. It's 14 sections because there's a lot of stuff dealing with elections. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, this bill will be referred to CRP without objection.
Actually, I ask one question.
Yes.
So, and just in summary, that essentially removes the chair, or no, removes the commissioner.
No.
No.
So it removes JSAP.
Yeah.
Like it deletes everything
Okay.
related to JSAP from the bylaws and places all of that mandate on a new body, quotes, the Elections Commission Policy Board,
Okay.
underneath the Elections Commission, so that the commissioner therefore serves as chair.
Is there the chair? Thanks, Bart.
If I might add, in essence, it puts JSUP like in the Elections Commission. Senator O'Connor.
So, what is left in the bylaws?
Sections under where JSAP used to fall are now just copied and reworded in the section that describes the responsibilities of the Elections Commission. So very little is actually permanently removed. It's just reorganized and reworded to update where it falls in terms of the general bureaucracy.
Further questions? Seeing none, this bill will be referred to CRP without objection. All right, next to the policy book, the clerk will report the legislation by number and title.
Policy book 17-18-6, a policy book to update the elections policy book.
Senator DeGose, would you like to speak as the author of this legislation?
Sure. So in order to accommodate the previous bill of updating the responsibilities of the Elections Commission and migrating JSAP, the policy book had to be updated for that reason alone. And in doing so, I worked with a number of other senators, including Senator Zitzman, Senator Rakowski, and JSAP Chair Eamon, as well as J-Board Chair Wills, and really looked at a lot of what the elections policy book could do to be updated and fixed, as well as prepped for the moving of JSAP. There's a lot that we constantly see in elections that new loopholes are found, people exploit them, and contingencies are seen that need to be provided for. And I believe that this new policy book goes a long way in addressing a lot of those. Again, happy to answer any questions on it.
Questions for Senator DeGose, Senator O'Connor.
So under elections ethics, you asked a bit about misleading, QAnon misleading, which is obviously a good thing, but, somebody who has a lot of experience with elections and campaigns and stuff, as a candidate, to some extent, you are pushing your own version of the facts, if you will. So I guess I have a concern, whether, obviously people have lie, and that's not a good thing, but I feel like I have concerns that mislead, it's very big.
So a lot of that is not for preventing candidates from pushing their own views during elections. It's specifically, if you look at the section for when they're communicating with the Elections Commission and the Judicial Board. That basically the idea of it is so that if a candidate tries to lie during a J-Board case, there's then an extra thing that you can be charged with, so they're encouraged not to do so.
Yeah, I'm just saying, obviously there are points where there's an outright lie, but the vast majority of the time, things are
which is why I think it's more the intent to have that in there so that the judicial board can determine when it is that gray area and when it's black and white, so that if they so choose, they can use that as a charge to say you're not allowed to lie very clearly right here. Whereas if they think it's a much more gray area, they can choose to say, no, that's just them trying to push their case.
Yeah.
Further questions?
I mean, yeah, I guess,
Senator Rakowski-Sparks.
yeah, I guess my question would be like, no, I'm good.
All right. Further questions? All right, seeing none, this will also be referred to CRP without objection. All right, and finally, we come to the consideration of the Special Committee on Finance report on affordability. So just to remind everyone again, this is being considered for its first and only reading before the Senate. The Senate can adopt it, the Senate can reject it. The Senate can refer it back to the Finance Committee, but no other committee, and the Senate can table it in the full Senate. It cannot be amended on this floor. The only way to amend it, the only way that is listed to amend it is to refer it back to the Finance Committee. So with that, is there any discussion on the report? Senator Goes.
Yeah, so I said this when Senator Hawk was presenting. I've been looking through this in that time. It's impressively well written. It's well researched. It's super thorough, comprehensive, and I'm really impressed by it. So I hope that we can all pass this because it's really impressive and deserves to be published.
Any further discussion?
I have just a quick question. So when you say that it can't be altered now, it can only be sent back to a committee?
That's what the bylaws say.
Cool, just curious. I second what Senator DeGo said. I think it's great.
President Payano?
Well, I was a senator, and while I have nothing against it itself, I do encourage everybody to read it. So if you haven't read it fully, and that is the majority of you guys, I prefer tabling it. And then you guys being able to feel comfortable pushing it out rather than pushing it out because a few people that have read it is speaking highly against it. Like, you represent your body, so like I'll just like if you're presenting something, I encourage that it's being presented with everybody's full support. Not even full support, but full knowledge of what this is, so that if a student come and ask you, it's not like, oh well, didn't read it fully. So I mean, that's just my personal belief, but like, it doesn't matter.
Senator Robbins?
Yeah, I want to echo what President Payano just said. I had the chance to read it, and I'll just echo Senator DeGose's praise. I think it's very well written. I think it's very well researched. But I think that it is worth discussing amongst this group, it being tabled just for the sole reasons that we all can have a chance to read it. We can all have a chance to understand it, and then if any questions need to be placed, it can be placed in that time as opposed to just passing it through now.
Senator Rakowski-Sparks?
I agree with President Payano. I do think it's troubling when the Senate passes something and doesn't necessarily understand it or how to advocate it best. At the same time, with no disrespect to the Senate at all, I come all the time and I love all of you guys. I do think that it is all of our responsibilities as senators or proxies to be prepared when we're here for a meeting to read the legislation and the reports, even if they're long, given that there is so little time before the school year ends, and given that financial aid is particularly important at the end of the semester when students could be losing or seeing a reduction in their financial aid, rather than tabling this for another week and risking not being able to publish it before the semester ends, I would like to motion that we take a 15-minute recess right now, allow everyone the time to open it, to read it, to make sure they're comfortable with it, and then come back together so that we can ideally vote to pass it.
Do you make that motion?
I do.
Is there a second? Second. All right, there's a second. Discussing it? Yeah, okay. Is there any discussion on recessing for 15 minutes? Senator Robbins?
I have a question. I can't
Point
find
of
it.
inquiry. I sent it to the hashtag USG, but I'll send it to you directly. Let's check if my email worked originally. Does everybody have it in their email other than Nelly? All right.
Uh-oh. Wait, no, sorry.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, that was sent 4 hours ago.
All right. Senator Robbins?
I agree with everything that Director Mascaro has just said.
But my only concern is that there's a number of proxies who are here today, and that email doesn't get sent to the proxy. So we could forward them, and that's fine. My only thing is that this is a long report. It's like 37 pages, and it really takes like a good amount of time to read it. And I sat down, had my coffee, I read it. Recommend you do with some coffee. It's really good. But it takes a little bit of time, and then it takes a lot of digestion. And I don't want. I think it can be just as harmful if we do a 15-minute skim and not a thorough read through. Like if we just pass it without reading it, you know what I mean? Like I think it's better if we table it instead, have everybody read it till next week, and then pass it and push it out then, when everybody's had the chance to read it, as opposed to just a 15-minute quick read where I don't think that's enough time.
Discussion on the motion to recess, Senator O'Connor.
Yeah, I have to agree with Jacob. I think the most important part about this entire report is the fact that we will then advocate for things in this. And I feel like giving us another week not only just allows us to read it, but also come up with like, potential solutions. Like, again, coming up with, say, a new person case that deals with scholarships and stuff like that. So I think, passing it now isn't necessarily like, a bad thing, but I think we didn't kind of miss the point of this, which is to come up with legislation and ideas to actually carry out the goals of this. And I feel like, I haven't read all of it. I feel like we can do that better after we've had a couple days to digest, come with some ideas, discuss amongst ourselves.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that, Senator O'Connor made a good point, but keep in mind that the bylaws say that reports are not binding policy of student government, meaning that if you don't agree with what's in that report, you don't have to advocate for it.
Senator Chen.
I definitely agree with what everyone's saying. I think it's so important that we know exactly what we are pushing out as a body. My only thing is I don't think that giving it another week and having everyone read it is going to change whether or not we pass it. We're going to pass it regardless. You know what I mean? So like the work was already put in. Whether we read it now and then we pass it, or we pass it and then we all thoroughly read it with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, whatever you want. That's not going to change anything. Does that make sense? We're going to choose to advocate for what we believe in personally as senators, and the body's going to choose to advocate for this, and that doesn't really change whether or not when we read it.
Yes.
Is the Frederick Douglass scholarship a full tuition? Because I was under the impression that the Frederick Douglass are like 60,000. It's a full tuition.
Senator Hawk.
Okay.
Do you have an answer to that?
I believe it's a full scholarship. I'm not entirely sure.
So then I just have one quick question. So under section how financial aid works, it says that the Frederick Douglass scholarship is only 10,000 to 15,000.
Okay, yeah, so this is, everything under that section is that's directly from the AU financial aid office. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, that's good to know, because then that's a larger point to make to the university. Got it. Okay.
Further discussion on recess, Senator Martinez proxy.
I would agree on tabling the bill. From what I've heard from questioning, there hasn't been anything concerning undocumented students and DACA recipients in this report, so I think it would be important to add that information because there is a considerable amount of undocumented students at the youth, and I feel that they need to access.
Senator Orkowski's proxy.
Yeah, I understand that concern wholeheartedly, and I would also acknowledge that despite the legislation passed last year by now President Payano concerning DACA recipients and students who are impacted by that law change, this Senate, and it's no one's fault, but the Senate passes legislation about DACA students all the time, and it means very little long-term. It's had very little impact long-term to do anything other than have one more piece of paper printed. You know what I mean? So I think given that this report is so well researched and so specific and has the potential to actually do good, I would rather see it released to the public as quickly as possible. And to Senator O'Connor's comment, I actually agree, self-motivatingly, for selfish reasons, I would rather us table it so that I could see Chairman Hawk add in a mention the case. But I care so much more about getting this out now at a time where we're not competing with people taking finals when no one is going to care at all about what we are telling them, that I think it is worth, if we need to take the time to table it now so that we can pass it today.
Questions on 15-minute recess? Is there any other discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, we will vote again. The question is on a 15-minute recess, and it has been seconded. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
I'm going to ask for hands. All those in favor of recessing for 15 minutes, please raise your hand. High, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, all those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, the motion is not agreed to, and we go back into discussion on the report as a whole. Is there any discussion? Senator Robbins?
I think maybe what there's like a little bit of, maybe not so much confusion on, but like, I just want to echo what Senator Hawk said. Like, this is not like a piece of legislation, it's not binding, it's a report. And so I would like to see it, I can understand that what Director Mascaro is saying about leasing it fully. And so I'm wondering, like, if we need to table it or we can just release it, because I also agree with what Senator Chen said, and I'm wondering if we can have some debate on this, because right now I'm a little bit unsure about whether or not we should table it or we should release it just right now. So I don't know.
Okay, I would just like, I don't know, it's, my point of inquiry, it seems to me that there's two, like, set of, like, it's like, who's releasing this report? It would be Chris, right?
It would be student owned.
This is.
No,
a-
I know, but like, who would be doing the release?
Chris.
It had to go through Chris, right?
He runs the email and social.
And, okay, and then this would be released under which platform? The website and an email?
And then maybe Facebook. It'll depend.
It'll depend. Okay, and then if they approve it now, it would be sometime this week.
Hopefully, again, it would depend up to what Chris could do.
Right, okay. I'm just making sure.
Senator DeGoes.
I honestly believe that we need to release this today. There's very little time we have left this year to do any advocating for the student body. And this is a fantastic tool to do that. This is something that we can provide to the university administration and say, hey, why are you not releasing reports every year on exact costs of this university when you say you are? Hey, why can't you look into doing these things over the next coming weeks and months when you have all the time to do that? And I feel like if we're going to get the most out of advocating for the plans put forward in this report, even just a few of them, having that extra week to do that can be invaluable, especially as we approach finals week when we're not going to want to have to do that because we need to be putting students first and studying. And when the university is going to be focusing on finals and when the student body is going to be focusing on finals. And I think that we need to release this now so it can have the power impact it deserves to have.
Senator Jimmy Sway.
I fully agree with what we should have this, just because, as you said, we're all in like the last, like, what, 2 to 3 weeks and counting things, whether or not you count finals. It's hard for students to deal financially over the phone, like, universities are all going home for the summer, so imagine doing financially over the phone, all your questions, well, they thought like they have support right now, and they can go to the financial aid office or their advisor and say, hey, like, can we talk more specific, instead of having to do it over the summer and like not like having that clear like line of communication.
Further discussion? Senator Robbins.
Just on a more technical note, something I'm just thinking about. If we decide to release it today, has it had a proper like look through for typos and everything, all the correct commas and everything? No?
If I may,
I trust Senator Hawk.
if I may make a note, I know I am impartial on what actions the Senate should take, but just as a point of information, there are some misspellings and other things. So with that, Senator Hawk, did you have a point?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, there are typos. I'm not a computer. I did like the vast majority of this report on my own, and like it is 37 pages, so there have to be typos. I'm not sure like if technically we could fix this before we like release it on social media or whatever. But even if not, I don't think that they detract from the points that the report is making. And I think that like not passing it because of typos and like foregoing all the advocacy that we can do in these next couple couple of weeks, but with some typos is just ridiculous.
Mr. Wills, do you think it would be permissible, assuming that the Senate would like to pass this report today, or there be a motion to adopt it with permission given to the Finance Committee to correct mistakes in the report after it's been adopted?
Not to interrupt you, Bobby, but I do believe that, and Chair Wills can correct me if I'm wrong, there might be a provision in the bylaws already that allows for the correction of grammar and spelling after passage.
All right, well, that is not in the report of the committee section, but it might be somewhere else. So, Mr. Wills?
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Okay.
I was thinking stuff about that.
Yeah, go ahead. Further discussion? President Payano?
Does every single section have a conclusion in which establish what the undergraduate Senate position should be? Or is it a suggestion?
It's a suggestion, because again, the reports for the bylaws are not binding policy. That's what the Finance Committee thinks that the other undergraduate Senate should do, but not, it's not a mandate.
Senator Pintar?
I just wanted to take a second and just like really acknowledge what Sarem did.
Yeah.
This is a 37-page report, and he is a freshman in this body, and I'm looking at the freshman right now. Just like raise your hand if you've ever written like a 37-page paper for a class before. So, I don't think he did.
Yeah.
So I just want to. I think that no one's perfect, and I think there are things we can fix on this. But I would make a point to not have the perfect be the enemy of the good. And this is something that can actually help students in the long term, especially coming up in the next semester, and how they can make their 2018-2019 year more affordable than it was in this year. So.
Senator O'Connor?
Yeah, now that I think about it, the point of this report is to get this out to students as fast as possible, to get them that information, because these decisions often take months to handle. So I kind of take back my point before. We can still do advocacy for this after.
Senator Demiso?
And it's like also really a comment, like, you did a good job, like, this was so good, I could never do something like this. It was like, it's our job to give the students resources and succeed. So if students have to read this, that's their own thing, it's not on us. So I say this is a really amazing way to like dumb down the information, give you what you need to know. So if they choose not to read it, it's not on them, it's not on us.
Further discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, actually, what do you have to say?
So there's nothing else. If there's anything, I would recommend that, or no, I would say that you can always do a kind of video referendum and come back next week and amend the report and then just re-release the same report with the fresh film.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will move into vote on the report. All those in favor of adopting the report, please say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, say no. All right. In the opinion of the chair, the yeas have it, and the report is adopted. Is there any further new business? Seeing none, we move into old business, of which there is none, and therefore we will move into a period of public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak at this time? Yes? Did you raise your hand?
No, sorry.
Okay, never mind. Seeing none, we will move into good of the order. Anyone for good of the order? Senator Chen.
Adding on to what Senator Pintar said earlier about Senator Hack's finance report, like I just like don't hold myself accountable. Like I know that as a member of the finance committee, like I let the ball drop on that one, and I know that there were other members of the committee that also let the ball drop into the finance report. And Sarem stayed up until 3 a.m. and he worked so hard on this 37-page report. And I just like want to commend him for that, because he really did it like because he wants students to have this information. I think it's very admirable.
Anyone else for the good of the order? I hope we don't lose quorum. Director Mascaro.
Yeah, I'll quickly ditto what Senator Chen just said, but I'll also add on to say that I want to congratulate President Payano more clearly on the huge win that she got with the Student Advisory Board for the presidential, or President's Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, excuse me, it's very difficult to convince the university to allow students on any standing committees or in any working groups. It is a challenge to get 1 or 2 people on it. It's also a challenge to get them on it without them being handpicked by the university. So President Bayano's victory is enormous. We're very lucky to have her. Congratulations.
Anyone else?
Oh, wait.
Yes.
I just gotta say that I am so happy that this body is becoming more intentional in the things that they vote on. And that they're
Yes.
not passing legislation just to pass it. I think that the previous discussion was not on whether or not should the report go out, but what is the intention behind it, and making sure that we had a thorough conversation and that everybody knew what was the purpose of this to be released in the first place. So I just have to say that, sometimes we need to do that in order to be okay with something passing. So I'm very happy because I was a senator before and we didn't have these discussions. So just to say that, congratulations, and I hope that even beyond me leaving and stuff, that you guys still continue on intent and impact, and always have that question of intention versus impact and what it is that you guys want to accomplish as a body. So good job. Thank you everybody for your hard work. And I know that being a senator and being on a Sunday here is not fun, but we made it, so thank you.
Anything further for the good of the order? President-elect, yes.
Just quick update again. So applications for the entire board are actually going to be coming out this week, just a heads up. I can't speak as I have the other execs, but for me, I'm keeping my cabinet pretty small. So right now it is looking like it's going to be chief of staff, case, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a position that I got figured out the name for, but it would be something along academic excellence, so helping with all of the key initiatives related to that. All of the financial pieces, I think, will be more so things that I kind of have knowledge on, given my time on the board, but also something I'll just work with our comptroller closely with, and anyone else in the undergraduate body in case wherever they are, because a lot of people are interested in that type of projects. I think there's no need to keep on taking positions for work that people are already doing. And then if, during the summer, I find that there are gaps in positions that have been made or something like that, there's a possibility I might open up 1 or 2 more in the fall, so that way incoming first years also have the opportunity to apply. But still TBD, so just be on the lookout and apply, and encourage all of your friends to apply, even if they're not a student resume.
Anything further? All right. If not, I will just say that this was easy enough. You guys made it easy enough to preside over the meeting, so thank you for not doing anything too wild. So if there is no further business, this meeting is adjourned.